everyone joining us today for our webinar. We're absolutely delighted to welcome Elizabeth Lambert, who is Assistant Director at the NCETM for Primary, who's agreed this afternoon to be our expert guide through some of the latest materials the NCETM only published. I think it was last week it all came out, so really hot off the press. And I know we had lots of material came out from the DfE and the NCETM just before we broke up at the end of the summer. So this whole new raft of 79 new packages and PowerPoints have come out now. And I don't know about you, but there's so much information. We thought it'd be absolutely lovely to have an expert guide, Liz, who's helped put it all together to really sort of show us the way, the route map, as it were, through this today to help us be better informed and be able to support our colleagues in really utilising this and hitting the ground running. I know in schools we've all got the same issues we're trying to deal with in this kind of, COVID landscape. So without further ado, there's myself here that introduces Jo Stedman, Maths Hub Lead. Say hi, Jo.
Hi, thanks a lot for coming.
Great, and of course Emma Gale, again Assistant Maths Hub Lead.
Hi everyone, grateful to have you here. I was just going to add to that part about the housekeeping here. If we'll all mute ourselves, obviously, while Liz, you're talking, and we will man the chat, so we will answer your questions as we go through.
Yep. And yeah, please do put things into the chat. So welcome everyone. It's quite weird not seeing your faces, but you can see me, and please do put things into the chat as and when they arise. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint. I am going to ask you to interact with it, so please do type into the chat when I ask you to. And just to put some context really to what I'm going to talk about, the Primary National Curriculum Guidance, I was part of the team that was looking at this, creating this, and that came out in June. And then since then, the NCETM have created some resources. So hopefully by the end of this session, you'll be more familiar with what I'm talking about and also have some ideas on how you might use them. So, please do put in some questions, but bear with me and I hope it'll become clear as we go through. So the host has disabled me to share my screen. So Emma, can you just let me share my screen? That would be great. I should have checked this beforehand. You just probably need to make me a co-host if you click on me and say, make me a co-host. Because at the moment I can't share it. You've probably got lots of questions about using resources and how does this fit in with what I'm currently using, whether you're using Maths No Problem or whether you're using Power Maths or White Rose Maths, and thinking about how do all these things knit together with it. And hopefully I'll give you some suggestions on how that might work, because they really will support you with what you're doing. So let's have a look at the PowerPoint. Okay. So Emma or Jenny, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you see? You can see it. Brilliant. Okay. So we're going to have a look into the rationale behind the guidance, and we're also going to think about the ready to progress PowerPoints that we've created and the introductory PowerPoint that I've also popped onto the NCETM website for you to use. So just have a look at some of these questions and see if any of these resonate with you. When you're teaching mathematics, do you ever think, ooh, I'm not sure which representation to use to draw attention to the structure of the mathematics, or ooh, I'm not quite sure whether my pupils are secure with what I've taught them, and what is it that I can do differently when I'm teaching? And language, am I using the same language as a colleague in my same year group or within my school? So some of these things have been with us for quite some time. How do we ensure that consistency? And the guidance has been created not to slim down the curriculum, but to really draw attention to the core ideas that thread through the mathematics and make it easier for you to teach. Hopefully it's going to make it easier for you to get your head around things. So 3 resources, just so you don't get lost in what I'm talking about and where they're all located. The guidance document that's on the gov.uk website. Now the links are on this PowerPoint, so I know that Emma and Jenny and Jo will share this PowerPoint with you. And then also some training material. So I've kept the grey background, that's on the NCETM website, and the ready to progress criteria on the NCETM website. So the guidance is on the gov.uk website, and then the other materials are on the NCETM website. And I'm going to talk about those in this particular session. So this is, again, something that I've mentioned already, but just is really important for you to kind of notice why this document was created. It's really clarifying the expectations for children when they are leaving a year group, that they will be ready to progress to the next one. So if they're really secure with these particular areas of mathematics, the next year group can build on them and the children haven't got these massive gaps. And it's not a spiral curriculum, it's a mastery curriculum. It's where children are building on really secure knowledge of the mathematics from the previous year group. It's not thinking, ooh, they haven't quite got it, I'll leave it for the next teacher. It's building and really having that secure depth of understanding. So the document is not for you to kind of think, what on earth is it being created for? It's really to support you with the delivery of the mastery curriculum. And you've got, when you go onto this website, I would say that you've got several documents that you need to refer to. And I'm just going to use, I think I'm going to use my highlighters. I think I did this with Jen. So there are several areas for you just to be aware of. This particular document has all of the year groups, and it says it covers years 1 to 6. It's right at the bottom when you scroll. And then here, some people have missed it. There's a link to some short videos. So for example, if you're a teacher in year 1, if you click on the link here to the short videos, there's an introductory video for year 1, and there's also one for the other year group. So that's missed by a lot of teachers when they go to that particular website. You can download each year group individually. If you're here as a head teacher or a subject leader or a work group lead, it might be that you want to use this document that covers the whole lot. And also in this one, it has appendix that the others don't. So I just wanted to just make sure you were aware of that particular bit of information. And then here, if you've already looked at this document, you'll be aware of these sections within it. So ready to progress criteria, the year group chapters that you will access as a teacher, and then the other areas that I'm perhaps going to talk a little bit about in detail, particularly representations. They are consistent through the document. Tens frames, like a 10U chart, part, whole models. If I'm talking like you've never heard of these before, when you go into the document, they hopefully will make sense to you because you will see that continuity of progression going through. And assessment questions that you can ask the children, they really clarify, have the children got that depth of understanding? So if you haven't engaged in the document, those are the areas that you will engage in when you start to work with colleagues and get your head around it. And if you're working with the Maths Hub, they will be part of the NCP work that we're looking at. So Jenny's nodding. They will be in development, embedding and sustaining. If you're not engaged with the Hub, please do, because that will be something that, you know, they will continue to support you with, because this is such an important document that we'll all be referring to. And then there are some strands. You need to have these in your head when I start talking about NPV. The strands are number and place value. You'll see that addition and subtraction are together. We call about additive reasoning. So we don't look at these operations separately, we look at how they're linked. And the same with multiplication and division. We look at multiplicative reasoning and see how these relationships really link together. So if you're not familiar with the strands, again, they are in the document for you to get your head around. So the aims of the document, to bring greater coherence and thinking about, for you as a school, how do you start to perhaps change your maths curriculum so that we have these important pieces of knowledge and understanding and connections made. So I'm going to ask you a question now, and you'll see it pop up, and I'd like you to have a go at typing in some of your thoughts to this question. How are we going to use the guidance to maximise the impact in our schools? So if you've got any thoughts already on how you might have already used it, or if you've got some insight into the document itself, how you might be using it. So I'm going to ask you just to have a little bit of a reflection time, because I've done a lot of talking, and have a go at typing some things into the chat box, how you might be using the document already. So Jen and Emma, you're going to be having a little look there if we've got anybody brave enough. Have we got anything coming through? Can you see if anybody's typing?
Nothing just yet.
Mm-hmm. It's early days. It might be that you've actually not prioritised this, and that's absolutely fine, because I'm going to give you some suggestions on how you might engage with the guidance document. So if you haven't engaged with it, because you don't really know what it's about, that's also fine. So don't be sat there panicking, thinking it's too early days. I've been just getting my head around being back in school. Okay.
We've got a few comments coming in, Liz. It's lovely to see. Yeah. So straight away, Rebecca Turville saying, developing questioning skills for misconceptions. We've got someone else saying to support teachers for planning for any gaps, which is really, really vital. Some people have been working in their teams, looking over the first few weeks, what might be crucial for the children. And others have already shared it with their colleagues, so that's really great. You're spreading that knowledge around your schools. And again, we've seen someone use it in PPA to plan a sequence of lessons. It's excellent. And one of our specialists, Mel, on there today, said she's using the, oh God, it's gone flying down the screen.
So Mel said, and they're using the slides from previous year groups to check knowledge is secure before starting the face value unit.
Lovely. Yeah.
Interesting, people are saying sort of concepts that they should spend additional time on. It's helpful to know which those really core concepts are.
Yeah.
And I think a really key one here from Rebecca, which is about the consistency in representations across the school, and how they're still really valuable at upper key stage 2 and shouldn't be forgotten there.
Yeah. What you said there really resonates with me. It's that bit about actually the representations to see the structure of the mathematics, not to do the mathematics. And often we can have teachers in year 5 and year 6 and saying we don't really need to use a representation, but actually we can unpick that a bit more with them and say, does it enable children to really see the connections between the maths? So some really, really great points. And I'm really impressed that you've done that much already when some of you have only been back perhaps less than a week. So thank you for that. I've put in here some questions that schools have been asking, thinking about why was it produced. The 2014 National Curriculum is a mastery curriculum, and it's not saying that it's wrong. It's saying that we actually are just producing something to support you with the coherence, because actually as we move through things and use it, we realise that there are areas that teachers have fed back and how we need to look at it in more detail. And the wording, giving it some clarity, moving some content, because remember when things have been organised into the year group into year groups, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to teach it in that year group. So I think my next slide, if I'm right, has got a question. I'm going to move on from that one because I'm just aware of time. Is that in the chat box, I want everybody to have a go at selecting whether they think A is correct or B is correct. So I'm going to give you a chance just to respond to A or B. The programmes of study statements need to be taught in the year group, and that's going to be A, in which they appear in the national curriculum. And if you think actually they don't need to be taught in the year group, then can you put B? And so Emma and Jenny, you're going to have a quick look and see what's our general consensus.
We've got a B so far. Another B coming in.
A lot of Bs, okay.
B's. Yeah, B's are winning your day, but B's are the stronger vote.
Yeah. So it's quite difficult when we're saying actually they don't need to be taught in the year group in which they appear, because they appear there to support us, and now we're actually saying we can move things around. And I think this is the bit about fractions. Do we teach them in the right year group? If we look at the models that have been used in China, they don't touch fractions until the children are much older. And we're starting to look now about what do the children need to be really secure with. So they don't need to be taught in the year group as long as they're taught by the end of the key stage. So for those of you that are starting to look and map out your curriculum, that's something just to be mindful of. And I've taken that sentence at the top there on the PowerPoint from the National Curriculum Introduction. So it's not something that is just my personal point of view. It's in there for everyone. And then, does the guidance need to cover the whole of the primary curriculum? So I'm going to do a Y or an N, a yes or a no. Over to you. Does the guidance document cover the whole of the primary curriculum?
The N's coming through quite quickly.
Yeah, it doesn't.
At the moment.
Yeah, it doesn't. So don't just use the guidance. I know it seems an obvious thing because there's way more to what we're trying to teach. It is just really paring things down to enable you to focus on what we're trying to cover. So the response that I've got in here is that we will need to cover other areas, but if they know the ready to progress criteria and they're really secure, they can apply that knowledge to the other areas of the maths curriculum. It will really support them. The connections are going to be really, really secure for them. So yeah, that's why the ready to progress criteria have been selected. So something that I've done for you this afternoon, and you are my first group, you've got the kind of the privilege really of having something that is a little bit more than just kind of going through the guidance. It's talking about the core ideas that are contained within it. So when you start to engage with it in year group level or school level, it might be that you're starting to notice things individually, but actually there are things that thread through all the year groups. And I think for me, having taught in all the year groups, I know if I was, let's for example, going back and teaching in year 4, I'd become really familiar with the year 4 guidance. That would be my priority. And I wouldn't necessarily know what was going on in year 6 or etc. year 1, because I needed to really get my head around the year group I'm teaching in. But unitizing threads through all the year groups, as does the 4 foci within place value. For year 5, there are actually 5, but for everyone else, there are 4. And the fact that actually there aren't any ready to progress criteria for addition and subtraction in year 4 might pass me by. So I've put these here for you because these are really important for you when you're looking at the guidance document at whole school level. I'm going to unpick these a little bit more with you. So the additive relationship that can be applied to this situation, I'm going to start to look here at unitizing. And children, when they start to learn to count things, they perhaps don't even have the one-to-one correspondence. You know, for my foundation stage teachers here, there's lots to unpick before we even get to this point. And I'm not going to say it's easy, but if we've got to the point where children can see all of those eggs, the first thing they might do is count them all, and they might put their finger on all the eggs and they might count them all. So I'm going to give you some statements, and we're going to think about the order that we might support children to develop. So I'm going to just go through here, and I'm going to share with you, and I've put some ABCDs. They're not in the right order of how children learn. And what I'd like you to put into the chat is the order that they would go through in order to find the total number of eggs. So I'll just give you a chance to read each statement. Jenny, you might want to read them out so they have a different voice, because it's a bit samey otherwise. You're on mute, so you can, that's great.
Thank you, just trying to okay, yeah. So option A, or seeing the eggs in 3 equal groups of 5 and use the known facts of 3 5s of 15. B, seeing the eggs in equal groups of 5 but still count all the eggs one by one. C, seeing the eggs and counting all the eggs one by one. And D, seeing the eggs in equal groups of 5 and counting up in 5s. And can you put them in the order? That's the quiz, isn't it, Liz?
It is, exactly right. So Emma, have we got some responses? Have we got some orders coming in?
We have, very quick off the mark, and they seem to all be saying the same. So we've got C, B, D, A coming through.
Fantastic. It's the wrong time of the day to be making you do this much maths, but you're really on the ball, so thank you. And it's this bit where I've put it in, is the additive relationship is where they can do 5 add 5 add 5. And then the multiplicative relationship is actually linking it into that known fact. And this is the repeated addition structure of multiplication. It's not a scaling structure of multiplication, but this is where we start with children in year 2, and then we build on the multiplicative relationship in years 4, 5, and 6. So when we start to introduce multiplication, it's really on the secure understanding of what's gone on in the previous years. And that's why there isn't anything in year 4 and 5 on the additive relationship, because that shift happens to the multiplicative relationship. So hopefully that starts to make sense about where things are placed and why there's such a strong focus on the additive relationship in years 1, 2, and 3. And I've put here the reference to the guidance so that when you get the PowerPoint, you can see where I've taken these representations from. And then I've got here the counters. So either somebody can unmute themselves or you can put into the chat box, why do you think it's important to have all the eggs and then the counters? What's the purpose of showing those units of 5? Any offers? Either unmute or ask to be unmuted or pop into the chat box. Otherwise, I'm going to pick on Emma or Jenny. It's again the careful selection of the representation and how it supports children to move their thinking. Has anybody offered, Jenny, to contribute or type?
We have. We've got somebody just said from pictorial to symbolic. Thank you, Jenny.
Yep.
And someone said moving between concrete to abstract and show the relationship between the real and the abstract.
If you have all the eggs visible, you could count them one by one. And so I could say cardinality visible. Hopefully that makes sense to you, because I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Whereas if I've got the counters, I can't see all the other things contained within the 5, and it's kind of forcing me to see that unit of 5 and then possibly counting 5s. And so the purpose of the representation is to move that to that abstract, and how you connect. How does that connect to the repeated addition, and then how does it connect to the way that you write it as a multiplication expression? The 3, you can't see a number 3, but you can see 3 5s, and there's lots to unpick. So for teacher subject knowledge, it's in the guidance. It's there to support you with how these representations connect and how you move children through this connected learning. So unitizing is something that we've used a lot in the PD materials. When I was looking at Spine 2 and editing that and writing units, is for me, it was that sense of where does this language of unitizing come from? So in the guidance, we've referred to it as well. And if you go into the DfE guidance document, and then you type in into the search bar, the search option, and you put in unitizing, you'll see how many year groups it occurs in. It is such an important area. And if that's kind of floated your boat and thinking, I want to find out a little bit more, you know, work with your maths hub. They'll be looking at that in more detail. So we can't do this as a chat, or can we? Is somebody going to be brave enough to say the unitizing language when you're looking at this in year 5 and you're looking at short division? So I've got the calculation here, 612 divided by 4. This is in the guidance document. It gives you the language that you would use. But anybody brave enough to unmute themselves and have a go at what's the language that you would use when you're carrying out this calculation? Anybody just type into the chat, I'll have a go. That would be fantastic. Any willing volunteers, Jenny?
It came in a flurry last time, so it's thinking time. Be brave. I was in the hot seat on Monday.
Yeah, I know. I picked on you, didn't I, on Monday when we talked through. It's hot. It's hard. Have we got somebody?
I've got an answer. Divide their dividend quotient exchange. Yep.
So we'd want to use that language. And then if we're looking at the unitizing, if I looked at this 6, let's have a go with the chat. How would you describe this 6? Because I'm first of all going to look at my divisor of 4. I loved how you gave me that language. And in my dividend, and I'm going to look at the 6. How am I going to refer to that when I'm dividing by 4? Anybody in the chat, give me that first sentence that I might use. I think this is quite tricky. I know when I've stood up in front of a group and we're looking at the language that we use, this is kind of why I've put this one in, is that consistency of language that you might be using in school. And it might be that if Emma was teaching this, she would say it in one way, and if Jenny was doing it, she might be saying it in another way. And so in the guidance document, it actually gives you support in making sure that we've got that consistency. So you've not got 600 divided by 4, because actually what is 600 divided by 4? It does actually give you a solution, doesn't it? You're saying, actually, I've got 6 100s. I think I would like to say actually 6 100s. And if you looked at it, I'm going to say the partitive model of division is that I want to put it into 4, or share it between 4, and I can give them 1 100 each, and then I've got 2 100s, and I can't give each person, if I had 4 of them, an equal amount of 100s counters. And this is something that we can look at in more detail, and in this session I can't go into it in more detail, but I've put in a link here for MathSpot. Again, I don't know whether you're familiar with this, but I'm just going to bring, let's have a look if I've got this one open. Just bear with me. No, I've got it here. Okay, so you've got a different screen in front. You can see MathSpot, is that right, Jenny? No, you can't see it. Ah, okay. It might be that I've selected. Hang on, let me just see. No, I've got a web browser open. Okay, if you on here it says MathSpot, you can bring up place value counters, And it's really quite exciting how you can model that alongside this language. And if you haven't seen it, then it'd be something to go away with and play with. So I thought I'd be able to share that screen, but it's I could, but it would just be time that I don't want to spend. Okay, I'm going to move on. Let me just go here. So this is something, again, that I'm going to ask you to do something interactively, is that when we're looking at place value, in the guidance document, there are 4 particular areas in number and place value, and they've been labelled as 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you might well have started this when your maths planning has started to take shape this term. You might not have even started maths yet, but when you do, we tend to look at number and place value. If you were going to give each one of these areas a title, looking at these representations, what might they be? So I'm going to give you a chance to have a little look, and it might be that you select one of them just for the time. You might just type into the chat box MPV3, and looking at those representations, what aspect of place value is that particular area looking at? So select one of them and have a go at writing a kind of a headline. What's this focusing in on? Pick one that you're really comfortable with, because I share then the responses.
Emma, do you want to read them out?
Yeah, that'd be great.
There's one here, so NPV2 whole part model. And again, we've got another one for 2, which was partitioning. We've got a couple of those actually.
Yep.
NPV4, potentially bar model. That's
okay.
Come through.
Yep.
We've got NPV3, numbers in the number system, number sense. And another one for 3, which is estimating.
Okay.
And we've got rounding as well for number 3 as a suggestion.
Yep. So this is really interesting, because I would like you now, everybody, to type in if you've covered any of these already in your first few days back. So just type in, if you think you've already covered a little bit of MPV2, just type that one in, or if you've covered a little bit of MPV3, type that one in, and let's just have a little think about what's actually been covered already.
We've got a couple of NPV2s, a one not yet, another one, an NPV1, somebody's saying 2 and 3. 2 seems to be the one that most people are putting in at the moment.
Yeah, and I would say that that generally is the case. We do a lot of that particular one, which is, let me just get rid of that one. I'll give you the title, that will help. I've got this highlighter on that's driving me mad. So partitioning numbers is MPV2, and we're going to do it according to its place value and also non-standard partitioning. And then that's the reason when you're looking at subtraction or maybe division. MPV3 is that linear number system. Where do numbers live in relationship to one another? And then the common partitions, which is NPV4, is really supporting children within the context of measures, reading scales. If they don't have that understanding, then that will always become a real block for them. So although we've got a bar model, you've got the bar model, which is the partitioning into common partitions, and also the linear model for reading scales. I think we don't do that one very well. I think that's one that tends to drop off. And MPV1 is that relationship between adjacent place value units, and that's something that perhaps we perhaps link in with MPV2, look at the value of digits. So those 4 areas have been really explicitly given detail in the guidance document to support children with that depth of understanding of number and place value. So it's really worth looking at those and mapping out the ready to progress criteria, making sure that we're covering all of these and giving them enough time.
I think that's a real strength of the materials, the fact that they kind of show these different representations, as you say, the different foci, and the fact that you don't forget anything by mistake or by accident, which is easy to do. And I think the language is also so strong as well as throughout the whole of the materials. That's what I'm finding helpful, looking at some of the year 6 materials, looking just sort of doing a sort of browsing through, seeing how strong the language is, which will really support teachers thinking their planning, their STEM sentences and the generalisations, just really, say, so useful, so user-friendly, the way it's presented.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the additive relationship that I talked about being so important to get right for children in years 1 to 3 is that the representations that you might be using, the part, whole, the bar model, is that you can write some number sentences alongside of these, and you're not just going to write addition number sentences or equations. You're going to write subtraction ones as well. They should be taught together, because again, it's that relationship between values. So when you've got your part whole and you've got your 28, if you know the 28 and then you didn't know, for example, what this value was, if I'd place my thumb over the 20, you'd be able to work it out through doing 28 subtract 8. Does that make sense? So these relationships between values are really important, and whether you present it like this or whether you present the whole as 28 here with the parts underneath, in this case the additive relationship can't be described as a multiplicative one because they're not equal parts. So children start to notice that when the parts are equal, then it starts to make connections to the multiplicative relationship. But writing these equations and making sure that it's not just about writing numbers in a different order. I think some children kind of think, well, if I swap them over, then it will be fine. It's really understanding why they can swap them over and how they are connected to one another. And again, writing, in this case, the sum or the whole first, to ensure that actually that understanding is not about the answer to a solution. So the relationship between these two numbers, Emma, I'm going to pick on you. So what's the relationship that you can see between 20 and 60?
So an additive relationship.
Brilliant. And what am I going to add to 20?
40.
Going to add 40. Okay. So it's brilliant when you can see that straight away. So for some children, they'll see that relationship and they'll look at it and think that's fine. So if we look at this and we write it as the additive relationship, as Emma has done. And then Jenny, what's the multiplicative relationship?
It's 3 times. 60 is 3 times 20.
It is, and it's that bit how we're trying to shift. And a lot of children, surprisingly, could leave primary school without really understanding that multiplicative relationship. And that's why it's so important for proportional reasoning, understanding of fractions, etc., that we shift that thinking to multiplicative relationships. And that's on page 299 of the guidance. You'll see that that's obviously happening quite late on for children's learning, the additive and the multiplicative relationships, not for operations. So here, I've talked about this already. I've just taken a screen capture of the guidance just to draw attention to these 2 columns here. It doesn't mean to say you're not teaching addition and subtraction in year 5, but you haven't got any new ready to progress criteria. And if you're a year 2 teacher, you might think, I'm doing loads, I've got all of these here. Yes, it's where that real importance focus it comes in, knowing number facts and how they, the structures of the additive relationship are really, really spent time and depth on. And then in year 6, they don't have addition and subtraction as a strand. They have all of the 4 operations because they are making those connections that have been built up over the years before. So again, just looking at those, they've been termed differently because you're now looking at all 4 together. So you've got the guidance document that's on the gov.uk website. On the NCETM website, you've got something to support you in its use. So I just wanted to make that distinction between the 2. So when you come to this page, when you type in ncetm.org.uk, on the home page, it says find out more. And when you click on find out more, that's when it will take you to further resources. So I hope I've still got everybody with me. I feel I'm doing a lot of talking, but it's just the nature of trying to kind of give you this information in such a short period of time. So the first resource that you might come to, and I've taken this from the website, there is a little tiny link. So I apologize if you're colorblind. I think our website design, there's been lots of feedback about how great it is, but if you've missed this link, it says there's a ready to use training material. And here is a PowerPoint that I've created to support schools to engage in the document. And it looks at how you might use it to support you in your long-term planning, your medium-term planning, and your short-term planning. And it's got some suggestions for each of those particular areas. So it could be that you used it all together. if you're here as a work group lead or a subject leader, it might be that you want to work with it, but it's a kind of a collaborative tool. It's a way of engaging in discussion. So although you could look at it individually, it's really something that I would say I'd like you to work together, and head teachers that are here, it might be that you look at it and consider, what are the implications for my school? Looking at the guidance document, the PowerPoint will take you through that. Anybody got any questions, or did anybody use it on their inset day, or anybody kind of want to ask me anything more about the that particular resource? You could pop it into the chat box, and I know that Jenny and Emma will share.
Off the press, we're very impressed you've used it already. I
Wow.
see some people are planning staff meetings in the near future, so maybe this is an ideal starting point for that, and perfect for delivering in a kind of Zoom or Teams kind of format as well, if you want to have that discussion with your team in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I tried to do it so that actually, that awareness that if you wanted to deliver it online, that would be suitable. So yeah, please do use it and amend it and tweak it, but it's hopefully a good starting point. You don't need to do all that hard work about mapping out the progression of RTPs, etc. I've done that bit for you, and put some questions in just to prompt thinking. It's got some more frequently asked questions. Some of the slides that you've seen in this afternoon, I've taken from that particular PowerPoint. It also kind of gives some pointers for teachers to say, yeah, you might do this in your planning. And it's not saying do it, it's just giving some suggestions. There's a little bit like it's like a note thing saying just make some notes about things that you might do as a result of watching the PowerPoint. So yeah, that's one of the resources. And then the other resource, and again, this is on the NCETM website to support you with the guidance document, are some ready to progress criteria PowerPoints. And we worked with the specialist over the summer holidays, looking at what resources we might use for a COVID-19 recovery curriculum. And we have to be pragmatic that there are some children that will have done very little maths, and not through their own fault, just that it's been a long period away from school, and they might well be quite behind. So what do we put in place to support them? So each ready to progress criterion in the guidance, a PowerPoint has been created. And the specialists who've created them, they're practitioners in the classroom. They've thought of practical things that you can do with resources that you've got accessible to. Kind of small group scenarios where you are not going to try and use the whole of the PowerPoint in one session, but you might use a few slides, really thinking about the questions that you ask. And I would say that if you've got children with gaps, don't go for the year group that you're teaching, go for the previous year group. Because remember, they're ready to progress. If they've got them, if they've met them, they're ready to progress to the next year group. And you've got a whole year to dwell on the ones for your year group. So actually be secure in the ones that they might have got gaps in. And for each one, there are some slides, and I don't expect you to read all of those. But again, I don't want you to make copious notes, because at the front end of every ready to progress PowerPoint, there's some information for you. So whether it's a teacher delivering a small group intervention, or HLTA or a TA, or actually you're using them in the classroom, there's some suggestions there about how you might use them. And we've been really, really fortunate. We've worked with Cambridge and Enrich, and they've provided some activities. So Jenny, I don't know whether you want to say anything more about that, because when we talked about this on Monday, we were thinking about some of the models that people might use these PowerPoints in.
I just think it's great. You might be able to use sort of TAs to do some small group support, but equally, again, we recognise some of our children have really engaged with remote learning over the last 6 months, and some of them haven't. And it might just be after that first lesson, that chance again to give some focused teaching to a particular group, while other children are ready to progress with an Enrich activity. So I think it will really help teachers to know they're hitting the right notes and they're really focused on a particular objective. The whole class is working on the same concept, but again, you'll be able to target that support where it is needed, where you've picked up from your assessment on the previous day. So I just think this is such good material, and so it's user-friendly for teachers and support staff, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you. So over here on each of the PowerPoints, there's a link to the primary PD material. So many of you will be familiar with those, and it might be you want to know, how do I reference more subject knowledge detail and the small steps that are contained in the PD materials. So you don't need to, again, hunt around to find the relevant one. We've done the link for you. So when you open up the RTP, the Ready to Progress PowerPoint, you've got a slide with the links to the relevant PD materials. And also here it talks about the language focus. So can you see that, Jenny, when I'm doing the highlighter? Yeah, it's got the language focus box. And again, that supports you when you're using the representations to use the mathematical knowledge and the language alongside each other. Supports people that perhaps are less confident. It will really tie into the guidance and tie in with the PD materials. They link. You'll see, for those of you that are familiar with both resources, that the representations are the same, the language is the same, so it's not something different. And if you're not using the PD materials to plan with, if you are using White Rose or Power Maths or Maths No Problem or something else, I don't want you to be here thinking, oh blimey, you know, this is yet more stuff for me to get my head around, because actually I know White Rose have mapped out the Ready to Progress criteria. They're kind of making the connections. It's the bit about how do you work together to enable children to be secure with the mathematics, and hopefully we've pared it down so that in the guidance, when you look at your year group, you can see how you can make the connections to your existing planning. So we're going to have a think about using one of the RTPs, one of the Ready to Progress criteria PowerPoints, and in the chat box I want you to think about what's the core structure of decimal numbers, because we really focus in on it in year 5. So it's an A or a B. You don't need to type anything more than A or B. So Emma, can you read out the 2 expressions as we wait for some responses? You're on mute. You're going to have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. They represent equivalent fractions expressed in tenths, or B, they represent an extension of the place value system.
So make your choice now.
And we've got some answers coming in. I think people confidently answering B there. It seems the most popular option.
Fantastic. You've got some really good mathematicians online at this late hour of the day. It's fantastic.
Very impressive, isn't it?
Really impressed. And it's that bit about knowing that when we're looking at place value, I suppose some of you will remember when we did fractions, decimals and percentages, and we kind of thought this is where we'll focus in on them. We're really thinking about the core structure of the mathematics, and this RTP hopefully will exemplify this. So you got that one right if you put B. Don't worry if you put A, it doesn't really matter. So for those of you that have looked at place value already, we do this really well as teachers. We look at a number, and we might represent it using place value counters, because we're trying to look at each unit in the case of 3 ones and 4 tenths and 2 100ths. So it's looking at the value. Oh, hang on, what's going on here? So we might do this. If I could see you, I'd be kind of looking for a thumbs up, but it's that bit about familiarity. You'll have introduced the part-part whole model right back in year 1. So Jane Lomas, she's raised a hand. Is she going to talk to us? That'd be exciting. Let's go to Jane. Or she might have used it. It might be just that Jane's saying, yes, I've used this week. Type in the box, Jane, if we can't unmute you. So along with the representation on the slide, you then got some questions that you might ask. Jenny and Emma's, they're smiling. Is it because Jane has used the representation? That's great. Thank you, Jane. You were doing an interactive bit for me. It's got some questions that you might use. What does the 4 represent? What does the 3 represent, etc. And it's got the language box. We'd expect the children to respond in the full sentence that represents 4 tenths. And then it tells you might repeat it for other numbers using the part-part whole and getting the children to use that part-part whole model. So I've put on here from the RTP. We do this well. And I think the thumbs up is that, yep, Jane's been doing that. That's great. And then thinking about what else we're going to do is that this is also looking at how we look at the representation, but we've got it now in a different way. We haven't got the part-part whole, but we've got to start putting the parts together, linking in with place value. So what number has been represented, and we can write it here as 0.42. I wonder how many of you would have used a Gatenio chart and looked at the relative value of these digits, and how you've got 0.4 and how it is 10 times the size of 4, and how if we wanted to have 4 hundredths, if the 4 digit was in the hundredths place, it would be the tenth the size. You know, it's that bit about the language that we use. So highlighting it on the Gatenio chart really draws that relationship to the value of digits within the place value system. And then also when we look at it, we can ask the questions, how many tenths and hundredths are found in this number? So again, it supports teachers, and these RTPs with all the questions in have all been created for you to use and adapt and amend with the Gatenio chart on that you don't have to create. So again, you might magpie this to put into your lessons if you use PowerPoint to plan and deliver. So do we link all these representations as well as we could? Well, we've got some suggestions here on how we could be better. And then this one is about skip counting in hundredths, and somebody spent a long time. I'm clicking now to take you all the way through, and it goes all the way up to 1, but I'm just going to go to the next slide. Let's have a look. I'm going to take my highlighter off because it's driving me mad. If you skip counted and you had 0.18 and then you went to 0.2, you would select these two numbers for a reason. And it's that bit about the person delivering that work with the children, not having to second guess what it is. So I'm going to go to Jenny. We unpicked this, didn't we, on Monday? Do you want to just share what we discussed about why would we select these two numbers if we were skip counting in hundredths?
We just talked about, again, how this is really well curated examples because they are classic misconceptions, aren't they? So many children will look at that and try and imagine a number bond there, not really looking at the, you know, the size again of each represented digit. So I think it's just really good examples that again save you the work of having to keep thinking of those really good examples.
Yeah, and we could say 0.2 and we could say 2/10, but actually we want them to know that 2/10 is equivalent to 20 hundredths. And by skip counting in hundredths, they'll have gone through that through saying it, you know, so 19 hundredths, 20 hundredths, 21 hundredths. But when you write it, we don't have that 0 there. And so knowing that equivalence is so, so important. That comes back into the number and place value. And it's got the language box to support you and how we say it. We're not going to say that there are 2/10. There are 2/10, but 2/10 is 20 hundredths, and we're going to say there are 20 hundredths in 0.2. So again, really supportive, I feel, in these slides that we really unpick the mathematics to that depth, and the children, the unitizing, we're using a different unit. We're using the unit of hundredths, and we're saying there are 20 when we look at 0.2. I was quite excited about that one. You probably think I'm quite sad. I get excited by a lot of mathematics, but that slide I loved. So I've kind of just got some thought bubbles for you because there's so much stuff now that I've presented to you and you're kind of thinking, what on earth am I going to do? So for you personally, if you've joined us as a teacher, to get more familiar with the guidance, I would suggest just stick with your year group chapter, really get your head around that in detail so that you've got an understanding of what the implications are for you in your year group. And then watch the year group video as an introduction if you've not even dipped your toe in the water. If you're thinking, what on earth has she been talking about? I've not seen it. I've had a summer holiday and it's a guidance document that I really want to get my head around. Watch the video to start with. And then if you are here and you're here as a head teacher, a subject leader, and you want to look at it more widely, is I would say that if you're going to do that one, use from the NCETM website that introductory PowerPoint, because that really guides you through how you unpick the guidance. It looks at it at long-term planning, medium-term planning, etc. So use that introductory PowerPoint, or even just go through it yourself and then make your own kind of way of supporting your staff to engage with it. And then if I think about the ready to progress PowerPoints, the 79 of them that have been created, for you as a teacher, focus on the ones that are from the previous year group, because you might be thinking about my assessment for learning. I've got children with some gaps. How am I going to support my children with those gaps? And I would say use the year group RTPs from the previous year and kind of get some intervention in place. And then whole school is that, have you got TAs and people to deliver that? Have you got people across your school that might support you? Because there might be children all over the place that you're trying to juggle with in this very strange time of where we're trying to do catch up. So hopefully those suggestions are kind of manageable and not too bizarre. So I've done lots of information, and I really just want to open it up now for you to ask me some questions. We've not left a huge amount of time, but we have got some time, and I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint screen and see whether we can have some Q&A just for the last 5 minutes. Anything coming in? You might just be totally just phased by how much I've been sharing.
Give people a minute, just have a little think and a good question.
We've got a thank you.
No, thank you for bearing with me. It'd be lovely to see your faces. I always kind of gauge people's reaction, but I think the chat that you've offered today and engaging in some of the interactiveness that I've been trying to do has been really, really great.
We've got a few thank yous coming through, and which is great. I think obviously I'm just absorbing, but I wanted to say thank you in capital letters all for your time and work. Really helpful to have focused us on certain areas, and thank you. So a lot of thank yous. So I think people are really appreciating this, because I just think you've made it so clear how to find the documents, how crucial they're going to be to being part of our recovery, to be honest. I think hopefully, lots of thank yous. Hopefully it's going to be a case of people having something tangible that they can walk away now, and tomorrow they feel empowered to sort of share with their staff. And I just think the clear ways forward have really supported with that. I
think that, you know, for me, I would say is that we're not trying to cram more into these little ones' heads. You know, it's not because they've missed it, we're going to just try and stuff everything in from last year and this year. We're really prioritising the curriculum and making it manageable for you as teachers, because, you know, we have to support one another. And I think, you know, what we've tried to create at the NCETM and your Maths Hub as well, we will be supportive. This document is not like a puppy for Christmas. It was created before COVID-19. This document was in the making. We started this back in September, and then COVID-19 happened. So it's not a COVID-19 recovery document. This is not just for Christmas. It is actually ongoing, and we will keep coming back to it and engaging with it and working with you. So don't feel overwhelmed. If you've signed up to it with your hub, it will be a reference document that we will keep coming back to. And, you know, engaging with it in such a short period of time, it will have just given you that insight onto all the things that you can use, hopefully.
Yeah, in the chat, I have put a link to the Sussex Maths Hub website, because we're constantly updating. And I know we'll be looking at that to support teachers and their schools, and also maybe they might want to think about being involved in the mastery readiness and development groups as well. So Jenny.
Thank you. I think you've really whetted our appetites this afternoon, Liz. It's been great. A lot of people say they want to go away and really sort of digest this now and look a bit deeper and delve a bit, you know, themselves. I had a question though about progression of known facts, and particularly about sort of additive facts in Key Stage 1 and even reception. Does the documentation provide anything on that, please?
It doesn't necessarily have. Oh no, I'm going to say it has the appendix. If you go into the full document, it has those additive facts there. Something that I think I haven't made explicit in this session is at the end of every chapter is a section on calculation and fluency. So for year 1, go to the very end of the chapter and it will talk about those facts that the children should be fluent in. And when I said calculation and fluency, it's also looking at the procedures. So let's say a written method, it will then be at the bottom of the chapter, or sorry, not the bottom, the end of the chapter in the relevant year group. So it is contained in the document, yes.
And Mel's written in and said she found the guidance page, which lists the previous skills, really helpful, and she shared that with staff alongside the NCETM PowerPoints, and it's helped to identify the focus of staff training, for example, on unitising. So that's really, again, a good comment from Mel. Thank you very much.
And the way that the guidance has been set out, so if you're teaching in a year group, it's got the prerequisite skills of what's happened in the year before, and then it's also got future applications. And so although it's not explicit for early years, if you look at the year 1, it has the prerequisite skills that the children should have. So I'm not saying that you're making them year 1 ready in reception, but it has got a bit of an indication on the sorts of things that you might be looking at towards the end of the reception year, because they are in the prerequisite skills for year 1.
Excellent, thank you. Any final comments or questions coming in? I'd like to say huge thanks to Liz today for a really pragmatic, very practical advice going forward. I think it's going to help all of us and help support our colleagues as well. If your colleagues missed this today because they were busy, then this is going to go on the Maths Hub website so that others can share in the Pearls of Wisdom this afternoon, which is really good to know that it can live beyond this afternoon. And if you've enjoyed the webinar today, please do sign up for another one on the 21st of September, an hour of your time on remote learning, and Emma will be in the hot seat that night with Lauren Flores, sharing all her really practical top tips of how they've addressed it in their own schools as practitioners and how they're continually refining and developing their own and colleagues' skill set with that. I know it's something, you know, it's the real, isn't it, on top of everyone's list at the moment, trying to get our remote learning plans up and running on our websites by the end of September, in line with expectations from the government. So, as I say, really topical and really, you know, it's a great session. Highly, highly recommend. Please do join us for that. So anything to add, Emma or Jo?
Just a big thank you.
No.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time.
So much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Bye.